Good day, folks. Hey, this is Dr. Terry and Tom at the Metaphysical Mysteries Podcast, the most interesting part of your day. Today we have with us an attorney, or non-practicing attorney, PhD, Midge Murphy. She's known as a consultant for risk liability issues in the energy world, and she's an energy practitioner herself. She has a book out, which she's going to talk about, and this should be really interesting. This is an area that Tom and I have talked about off and on throughout various podcasts about ethics and doing the right thing. So, Midge, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
You want to give us just a little bit of your background so people know who they're talking to, and they kind of get an idea that you know what you're doing.
Yes, I do. Yes, my background is I am an attorney, but I no longer practice law. I offer my services as a risk management consultant in the field of energy healing. And I work with both individuals across the country and also training organizations that train or certify energy healing practitioners. Sort of where I started with all of this was that I was a hospice volunteer 24 years ago here in Eugene, Oregon. And as a result of that experience, I was trained in therapeutic touch. And that was my very first introduction to any kind of energy healing. And it was so natural to me. It surprised me. It really piqued my interest to look at it a little bit more in depth. And as a result of that, I met Norm Shealy and Carolyn Mace. And through Norm's program, I earned a PhD in energy medicine in 2001. And I'm the first attorney to receive a PhD in energy medicine. And then in terms of my energy healing skills, I have been a shamanic practitioner for many years, use a lot of shamanic processes when I work with clients and animals. And I'm certified in matrix energetics, and I have been initiated as a Reiki master. But where I'm really focused on and where my path of service is being a bridge between the two worlds of business, law, regulatory issues, government, and the field of energy healing. Because there's a void there in terms of the energy healing field wants to move forward, wants to become more professional, wants to become more integrated into the healthcare system. And right now, because of the fact there's really no true credentialing, it's kind of the wild, wild west. So I'm here to be in service to the energy healing field. And my book, Practice Energy Healing in Integrity, The Choice of Offering Your Gifts Legally and Ethically, is a great resource for those practitioners. And I have an exam based on the book as well, so they can start understand and learn about the ethical issues and the legal issues that we face as energy healing practitioners. And that's really critical, not only for becoming more professional, but how we are in better service to the clients that we serve.
Fantastic. Amazing resume. I've got so many questions. And I guess I'm going to start off with some real basics. As I work with different folks as they get started, I always say there's do's and don'ts. You want to give us a few do's and don'ts? Just some, you don't have to give all 100 of them. You just, some of the big ones, the do's and the don'ts.
What the big do is get training in ethics and legal issues. Know what the laws are and how they apply to you in your state. That's critical. The most important thing to do is to make sure you have a legally sound client agreement. That's an essential risk management strategy, so that's a legal document that protects you, but also it protects the client. And that's something that energy healing practitioners don't know how to draft because they don't have the background and training to do so. So that's really critical, is to get the proper training. And if you can, it's highly recommended that you become certified in the modality that you want to offer to the public. And that's a whole nother spectrum, because there are certification programs that are totally bogus and worthless, and there are training programs that are highly professional, done with a lot of integrity, and those are the ones that you want to be focused on if you want to offer that particular modality to the public. So that's just a couple things to think about.
And what's the don'ts? That's always, a big area. What don't you want to do? And some are obvious, but sometimes.
Yeah, well, there's so many.
Yes.
And if the thing is, people they think they're being ethical because they want to help people. And that's just a complete and utter myth. Just because you want to be ethical doesn't mean you know how to be. It doesn't mean you know how to even work with someone's energy system, how to be in a therapeutic relationship. And you want to avoid certain words if you're an energy healing practitioner. The biggest threat that we have in terms of legally is being charged with practicing medicine or psychotherapy without a license. So you want to avoid any kind of medical terms. You never have patients as an unlicensed energy healing practitioner. You only have clients. You don't offer treatments. You only offer sessions. So the nuances of the words are critical in terms of making sure that you don't put a red flag over your head and some licensing board, a medical board, licensing board comes after you and says you are practicing medicine without a license. So that's really what you don't want to do. And there are some states that have safe harbor laws, and we can go into that, as we have our discussion. But that's the biggest threat that unlicensed practitioners have. These laws, there are a lot of court cases, and where can I find that? And the truth is, you're going to get a letter from a medical board. You could be in Alabama, and you could get a medical board from Nevada saying you're practicing medicine without a license. We're going to shut it down because you're working across state lines. Not only the laws and regulations in the state in which you're practicing, but you're also subject to the laws and regulations to the state in which you are offering your services and where your clients reside. And because energy healing practitioners are unregulated, except for there's a few, there's an exception, that you're actually subject to all the laws and regulations for every state because you are offering your services throughout the United States if you're an energy healing practitioner.
It's a little scary too, and it should be a little scary because the way the world is now, I mean, people in the woo-woo world, I call it, they get into this, pie-eyed, and it's all rainbows and unicorns, and it's not that way at all. And they can make an honest mistake in the way they practice and cause themselves an immense amount of problems.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a profession. And I think that's really important to realize that you're offering a healthcare service to the public. And that's a very heightened level of responsibility that we have. Even though we're not practicing medicine, Western medicine, traditional allopathic medicine, we are offering a healthcare service to the public. And the other thing that I want to mention here is that what's happening out there is that states are beginning to make rumbles. Some states have actually proposed legislation that would require energy healing practitioners to be licensed. So that's why it's a very potent time for the energy healing practitioners and the training organizations to understand that the government is definitely moving towards that direction to some kind of regulation. And I do want to make that one exception that I mentioned. By and large, the whole field of energy healing is unregulated. The only exception is there are a few states that require energy healing practitioners that use any kind of a touch technique like therapeutic touch, healing touch, Reiki, polarity therapy. Those states require energy healing practitioners that use touch to be licensed massage therapists. Other than that, right now, it's completely unregulated. But the future and how things are moving forward is states are really looking at some kind of regulation, which by and large means either a registration process or a licensing process.
In talking, and I'm going to let Tommy jump in here in a second, but in talking to a lot of people, their biggest concern is the AMA taking over this stuff. And of course, the AMA those folks don't have time to do. We all know how much time it takes to actually engage a client. And regular doctors don't have, one, they don't know anything about it, and two, they certainly don't have time to do it. But that doesn't strike anybody from, I don't think, from those hierarchies to not want to put everybody else out of business, because it is a business, and if they're going someplace else other than to the allopathic doctors, they're losing out. And they're really, I will run scared. They've done, there's a history of that. I don't tell anybody who's been in there, that's what they do, is they reach out and try to shut everything down except them. And they're very powerful in that because they put fear out there that, oh my God, this is completely unregulated. You'll get somebody hurt. And I don't think it's quite that extreme, to be honest. But I do think if you're following the practices that you're purporting, you can put things in check pretty quickly. And so forth. Tommy, you got something I know, so go ahead.
Yeah. just like Terry said, Midge, AMA, APA, they're all trying to regulate it, obviously, for various reasons. And to have some standards is a good idea. But like we're running into that right now in the law enforcement world with some states like here in Massachusetts where they're putting regulatory boards in place, but they truly don't really know what they're doing in some aspects. And so how do we manage that? Because, okay, regulations are great. They're trying to do that in mass, which you're describing, pass laws to regulate energy work. But who's going to be in charge of setting the standards?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. There's kind of a vacuum. There's a void. There are some folks that are sort of the major stakeholders in the energy healing community that are talking about putting together some kind of a national credentialing group that would be able to certify on a national level that states could look to say, so that we're kind of self-regulating ourselves in a way. I think that would be something that would be very helpful for the states, because in my experience, the states don't necessarily want to shut you down. They want input hopefully they'll want input from the community they're trying to license as to how best go about that. So I think some kind of national certification is something that we might want to look at. And I think there is some discussions going on around that. It's sort of based on the National Commission of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine. That's an organization that states have looked to, because now there's only 3 states that do not license acupuncturists. So as Terry was talking about, there's this turf going on. So, way back when it was chiropractors, the AMA wanted to shut down chiropractors, throw them in jail, but they managed to build their field, to get a legally defined scope of practice. This is what I do. And then they're now licensed in all 50 states and can practice. And acupuncturists kind of follow that lead. And now they're able to practice in almost every single state. And the states look to this commission where they certify acupuncturists, and there's other couple tests that they offer that the states require that they have in order to be licensed in that state. So I think that's another sort of framework that we can look at. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of discussion going on, and there's definitely a void into how best to bring our field together and to be some sort of a resource center for states that are looking to license us as practitioners.
The other question I have with this, which I've watched for years, as soon as something comes out that works, I find people that already carry licenses want to adopt that as theirs. And so, some of the agencies we've both been involved in where peers are able to do this work, but all of a sudden when we start licensing, they get excluded instantly because they don't have some form of clinical license per se. How do we?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand the question. So
I'll
there's
give you
different risks.
I've been a TFT instructor for years.
Okay. All right.
And I was practicing that through a trauma center as a police officer and a paramedic, no clinical license, with great results, no problems. But I understand as we start to move forward, people say, well, you need to have a clinical license to use that. Roger called it therapy, which was the mistake, right? That caused a lot of the headaches. But really what we're talking about, if you go beyond the clinical licensing practice, and again, we're going to open another door here, aren't we talking about energy and spirituality, and how do we regulate that?
I mean, I really don't know. I mean, the fact is that from my perspective, working with a lot of licensed people, because they have different risks than unlicensed folks. And if they want to bring any kind of energy healing modality into their practice, because thought field therapy and emotional freedom techniques are kind of the major ones that people know most about, tapping, is that they're not considered part of the standards of care or scope of practice as defined by licensure statutes in terms of your scope of practice. I think you're a licensed independent clinical social worker, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So it's gotten a lot easier. You can begin to, as a licensed independent clinical social worker, if you're mindful about it, you can integrate these non-traditional energy psychology methods into your practice. There's certain disclosures that need to be made. But I think what's important is that EFT, for example, has several applications. It is a great self-help tool. It's a great life skills, stress management tool when it's used properly and you're just dealing with limiting beliefs, or people want to feel more positive about themselves, or they want to have the courage to ask for a raise, whatever it is that they want to improve in their lives. And then the next step is it's a great therapeutic tool for people dealing with serious psychological disorders.
Mhm.
So the thing is that depending on how you present yourself and how you actually use these tools in your practice, if you're in the lane of life coaching and spirituality, that kind of stuff, you're fine. That's not a regulated field. But if you're a licensed independent clinical social worker or other psychotherapist, then you have to be mindful about integrating these new modalities into your practice. And because of all the research that's been done on EFT, the risk is really diminished because of the research that's been done. But in the past, which I'm well aware of, worked with several people that were psychotherapists who were told they could not use EFT in their practice because it wasn't proven, it wasn't part of the standards of care. And so they had to set up a separate coaching practice. That's kind of changed right now. But if you're going to want to introduce EFT or use it in your practice as a licensed mental health care professional, you better be fully trained in it, because if your board ever questions you and they say, well, you're using this EFT, how did you learn it? Well, I went to a weekend workshop. Right. That's not going to make you look good in terms of being subject to professional discipline. You really need to go through a quality certification program. That would be my advice to any licensed psychotherapist who wants to integrate either TFT or any of the other sort of methods, especially around EFT, into their practices. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. I mean, we're getting there. I know TFT was approved by SAMHSA a few years back. They were the first one, and there was a lot of research behind that. And now EFT's coming forward with their research.
Yeah, well, except SAMHSA, it's no longer listed anymore. That directory went away.
I know, but it made the cut, and then
it did. Yes, it made the cut. Yeah.
Makes you wonder why they took it away, right?
I know. Yeah. So I always say when I draft things for my clients that use EFT, that it certainly there's the research behind it to be considered an evidence-based therapy, but currently it is not considered an evidence-based therapy. It has not been fully accepted by the Western academic, psychological, and medical community. So, but it's made huge strides. And I think that helps, all of those folks that are using EFT, however they're wanting to use it with their clients or patients. And so they've made some great strides. And as you know, Tom, ASAP's been really, forefront in that in terms of, their research community and all the things that they've done, John Freedom and those folks. So they're going about it the right way. It just takes some time.
I actually sit on that research committee, and we put a lot of work on David Feinstein. If you don't know David, he's a psychologist from Johns Hopkins.
I know David very well.
The audience probably doesn't, though, and he's been a champion in getting this push forward to the the groups that we're talking about here today.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the stuff came from ancient mystical stuff too. They were doing this thing related to religion and so forth. Many of these things, psychic behavior and mediumship and that sort of thing as well, beyond just standard energy. But it's all energy. Everything's energy, so you could classify that well. And I think we get into some level of constitutional issues too when we talk about somebody's freedom of religion to practice what they believe in, and I think that's problematic. And then I also see, at least from some experience, the people with all the letters behind their names, a lot of times they may have the clinical understanding of things, but they don't have the spiritual side of it knocked down. In other words, they might go through the motions that they've been taught, but some of them just don't quite grasp the spiritual side of this because they weren't taught that way, very left-brained. And so if they're sucking all that up, so to speak, away from other people who actually have a spiritual sense, and they're actually getting the details down correctly, and I'm not probably outlining this very well, but it seems as though that's always the way it works. They follow the money, just like we always say in law enforcement, follow the money. And that's going to lead you to stuff, because the EFT thing, to get through EFT, I don't know if you get the latest numbers, but to start from basic and then get through all that, I don't know what that costs, but it is an enormous amount of money, which basically shoves most people out of that from, following the company thing. But that's more of a money-making thing than, as far as I'm concerned. Call it what you will, but, I really feel that that's some of the problems that we're going to see with this, is people, as Tommy alluded to, who may have the letters, but they don't really know what the hell they're doing, so to speak. I'm not going to stereotype everybody, but you've both run into this before. And, what are we going to do about that, I guess is the question.
Well, I don't see it in the same way. I think a quality training program is essential. It's a value. And I think that charging for it, whatever they charge, is fine. The ones that I'm aware of, there's the ASEP program. The other is EFT International, and they have a series of trainers in the United States. The one that I highly recommend is EFT Tapping Training Institute. And there's others there too. There's some other ones. I won't mention all these names, but if you're going to have a quality training program, certification program, then I have no qualms about the fact that it costs money. This is a business. There are certain investments you make to have a solid business, including getting your training, seeking getting training in ethics, doing your homework in terms of what kind of a business structure you need. And you got to pay for banking, accounting, legal fees, everything that goes into having a legitimate business. So if that leaves someone out, I'm not that concerned about them, because I think what's more important is that there's quality training with integrity and a level of professionalism as people want to go out and open a practice and offer their service to the public. So I don't have an issue with that costs money.
Tommy?
Yeah, I don't have a specific issue with that either. I mean, you pay for the service, someone's giving you their time and some value, so that's okay too. It's just hopefully it comes in at a price point that makes it affordable for the average person, I guess. Or, as we talked about earlier, different categories within a certain type of interventional tool. You either stay at home, help your family person, or are you trying to do a clinical practice, right? That should have a different fee structure, ideally, with different skill sets.
Well, if you're just want to, do it with your family and friends, that's not a business. Right. So yeah, you can go, there's lots of opportunities to take level 1, level 2, couple $100, that's it. In EFT, they're really good, excellent programs. And then you'd have some basic skills to work with your family and your friends. So I think, and that's available and it's not expensive. And I don't think the EFT trainings that I'm aware of are not exorbitantly expensive. There's EFT I'm aware of, but I don't look at numbers, so I don't really know what exactly they charge. But there's a commitment to, what's it cost to become a doctor? How many hundreds of thousands of dollars does it cost to become a doctor? So I think that, in terms of just, the ability of people to have a practice, I think it's doable. And again, in terms of how much money it costs, I'm not sure how it all adds up over time in terms of what you need to do. But again, you should have a budget and, find out what training organization you want to be aligned with and what it costs and your other costs that you need to think about, and approach it from that standpoint.
So you spend a lot of time setting up businesses, and I know one of the biggest challenges to all this world is what people put on their websites.
Yeah.
Right. And how they red flag themselves.
Oh, big time. Yeah. Yeah.
So anything you want to say about that area? Because I know that's definitely something people need to look for. Is this searching?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't help people set up their business. I do risk management audits of people's businesses so that they have in place what they need and a big part of that is an audit of their website, because websites are a form of advertising, and websites are subject to the Federal Trade Commission rules and regulations around how you offer your service to the public, as well as all the state's consumer protection laws. And I think you guys have some connection with that. And so the FTC has a specific commission, or a task force, they call it, that is looking at all of these newfangled, modalities that can, cure this and cure that. And they're looking at people that are very vulnerable, that have chronic health conditions, especially around weight issues, diabetes, some other kinds of chronic health issues. And so they're really looking, and they'll go after you in a heartbeat. They went after Roger Callahan.
Remember.
And so, so what you say on your website is critical. couple of things you have to be aware of. What kind of title do you use? There are certain words that are completely restricted by law that you cannot use as a title. I had someone that I knew, I'm not going to say the state, she wasn't licensed. She called herself an energy psychology practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
She was in violation of all 50 psychology practice acts because those laws restrict the use of the title of psychology or psychologist or those words to only licensed psychologists.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like this lack of information out there. And that's why the book has a whole chapter on websites and how to make sure you're using the titles that you want to use. Description of services is critical. If you say, well, I work with pain. Well, if you're not licensed, pain is considered a medical condition. If you're doing EFT tapping and you're some kind of a life coach and you talk about anxiety or PTSD or depression, those are all psychological disorders, and only licensed, as a general rule, only licensed mental health care professionals can work with people with psychological disorders. So as soon as you say anxiety on your website as an unlicensed EFT practitioner, there's a red flag over your head. So the nuances of the words are critical, and also the use of testimonials and what kinds of claims that you make on your website. There was a very large energy healing modality that got into a huge mess with the FTC because they were making medical claims about their energy healing modality. And it took a long time for them to get in compliance and to, be ready to go back out and work in the world again. And it could have been avoided if they had sought the legal help that they need in order to make sure how they're presenting themselves is legally sound and in compliance with Federal Trade Commission rules and regulations.
So besides the term psychology, for the listeners, what should they look for to basically validate the person as proper or improper? What would you suggest?
Well, it's who knows? I mean, the context is big. You don't want to use the word therapist if you are not licensed, because the perception is you're offering some kind of licensed healthcare services. So my overarching sort of theme here is to make sure that you're not perceived in some way as offering any kind of licensed healthcare services. So, I call myself an energy healing practitioner. That's the title but then I also make sure it's very clear that I do not offer any kind of, I explain what I'm doing as an energy healing practitioner, balancing the energy system. I'm not diagnosing, I'm not treating, I'm not offering any kind of medical services, blah, 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 blah. So, and those are the important disclosures that you need to make on your website, in your client agreements, so that it's very clear exactly what it is you're offering and that you're staying within the current legal and regulatory framework that governs helping professionals.
Right. Terry?
Well, I think it's fascinating, and I really think people need to hear this, and I'm really happy that the podcast gives a platform to this so we can talk about it extensively, because I think people get into it most of the time from the right perspective. And then, beyond just energy people, then there is I'm going to go psychics and the mediums and ghost hunters and things of that nature. And those things have been going on for eons of time. And it's an inherent thing. So I don't know, you're, as far as advice giving, so to speak, if you're giving a reading, is there anything that people need to be on the lookout for?
I'm not sure, with a reading, I mean, if you're doing some kind of an intuitive reading, I don't work in the world of mediumship and psychics, though I have had some clients that are, and I've helped them in the past. You just want to make sure you have really clear boundaries. And, it's really up to the client to decide what information that you're sharing has any value to them. So it's really important. I mean, I get intuitive material a lot when I'm working with a client. And, I use my discernment as to, is it mine? Is it theirs? And that's, a lot of work in terms of your own interpersonal healing, so that you know what your stuff is and you know what their stuff is, so that you're not commingling things. And that happens a lot if you're not really clean with your boundaries. And to really make sure what you're doing is just allowing some information to come up. And that's, you were talking about this, and I just sort of got a hit about this, or however you describe it, or there's an entity here that says they're a spiritual helper, and they have some information. Would you like me to share it with you? And if they say yes, and so you share it, but you make it clear, like, this is what you make of it. I'm not going to interpret it for you. That's not my job. It's not what I'm here for. But if I can share some information that may come through that has a value to you, then that's great. But it's not about telling anybody what to do. It's like, well, you need to go divorce your husband, or you need to quit that job. I mean, that's disaster. And that is not what we're talking about here. That's being in control, and something that can be extremely harmful if it's done in that manner.
I get a chance to work with a lot of psychic mediums and, discussionary things as well as practical. And so I've always, and I think we've talked about this before, but I've always had kind of a personal, and several others that I know as well agree with this, that they don't give any psychic readings beyond twice a year, once every 6 months, because what you don't want to have is a dependent client that every little decision ends up going to the psychic, and then the psychic gets money potentially. And so they see this as a gravy train, and they both get locked into, I need this person, and this person's paying my bills, so I'm going to go ahead and engage. And I think that is an ethical dilemma that any reasonable person should know. That's just too much. If you're, twice a week, they're having to call you, but to make any kind of life decisions, that seems problematic.
Well, it's huge ethical violation. I mean, I think with Tom and his background, it's exploitation of the power differential in the relationship, and it's hugely unethical. And what's happening is then there's all these projections that are going on as well. So, what archetype working with a client that needs you every step of the way? So, I mean, there's so many ethical violations around that. Having a needy client and just keeping them for the purposes of making money. I mean, that's like red flag. Let's get out the neon signs. That is highly unethical. And if that client gets unhappy, very much ethical violation that could lead to a lawsuit, because ethical violations can lead to legal liability.
Absolutely. Now, do you recommend, and I'm sure you do, but I'll ask the question anyway, insurance, and what should it cover?
Yeah. So that's another risk management strategy. There are a couple organizations that I'm aware of that offer professional liability insurance for energy healing practitioners. One is ASEP, the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. The other one is called, I think it's the EMPA. I think it's Energy Medicine Professional Association. I'm not exactly sure what all those letters mean, but they also offer policies to individual practitioners and also to people who might be doing some workshops and trainings. But it's not very expensive. I think it's a couple $100s. And, the insurance company does require you have a release of liability language and your client informed consent or client agreement for services. And it's a great tool. And you want to make sure that your particular modality is covered under the policy, obviously. And, there's so many out there. Oh my gosh, I'm getting calls from people I've never heard of this or that. But all the major ones that we are aware of, they're certainly covered. And so it's a great risk management tool. And I always encourage my clients to get insurance. And if they are doing tapping or that kind, they're leaning more that direction, to become a member of ASAP. That's also a great risk management tool. Belong to a national, international organization that has standards of care, ethics, research. It puts a lot of weight behind you as a practitioner.
Gotcha. So let's go through for the listener. They go walking into your office as an energy practitioner. What should they expect? I mean, what form should they fill out? What kind of conversation should they have? And then what would they expect to have unfold during their meeting with you?
Well, I mean, every energy healing session could be different. But I think one of the most important things to do is for the potential client to really do your due diligence and really research this practitioner that you're interested in engaging. How long have they been in practice? Do they have any referrals that you could talk to them about their experiences with this practitioner? What's their training? Are they certified in the modalities they want to offer? And if so, where were they certified? Get their credentials. And when I put a client agreement together, always list the credentials. And the laws with safe harbor laws, they also require all the credentials to be listed in the client agreement. So the other thing I would ask is, have you had any training in ethics and legal issues in practicing energy healing? So you want to make sure you have someone who's truly a professional. And those are the kinds of things that I would want to know. And then, you're building rapport. So you come in and you may be having an initial discussion. You've done your due diligence. You think this person is qualified. And then you want to work with them and you talk to them and get a sense if there's a good fit there. And then you want to sort of explain what it is that you're looking for. And hopefully the practitioner will say, well, I can't give you any guarantees, but I think maybe this is something we can work together on. Or, this is really outside of my scope of practice. I think what you're describing here is a little more serious from an emotional level, and that you might be better served if you saw someone who's a licensed psychotherapist, and I'm not one. And so you take care of your client, and that's how you start to really build rapport. And that is really the essence of what can really happen with a client, between a practitioner and a client. It's not necessarily the modality. It's how have you energetically connected, build rapport, that trust, and then really what modality that you use is secondary because of the cohesiveness and the sense of rapport that you've built with that client. And so, and you want to make sure they have a client agreement that you sign, that you know what the fees are. It's really clear what the services that are being offered. That's where people get really confused. They think they're going to an energy healing practitioner and there's no paperwork, there's no cancellation policies, there's no fee structure. They don't even know exactly what they're offering. And then they think they're getting this and then they don't. And then they get unhappy. And that's when, they get lost, they get sued. The practitioner gets sued because there's not clear lines of communication. So those are some of the things that I would look for if I was going to be engaging a practitioner that I was interested in working with as a client.
So many people have been in therapy for years and years, whatever issue, and then they end up showing up at a doorstep at an energy practitioner, and then all of a sudden they see great breakthroughs because those techniques are not used in maybe more traditional therapies.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody who's been around this has seen that over and over. Somebody has literally sat for years with somebody who's just not working the problem apparently effectively enough, and then they change to some other modality, and all of a sudden there's a connection and a breakthrough's occurred. Any concerns that we need to know about with that if somebody's under treatment from a psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, and even Tom might be able to talk about this a little bit, but this is what I've seen and this is what I recommend. If someone is being treated by some kind of a licensed psychotherapist and they come to you and say, I want to do some energy healing work, it can definitely complement the psychotherapeutic process, but you need to do it as a team. So everybody needs to be on board. So the psychotherapist needs to know that the patient wants to work with an energy healing practitioner, so that it becomes a team approach. And as long as everyone's on board, to me, that's the best case scenario for the help of the client. And we do know, and as things have grown, especially around the world of energy psychology, there's some other techniques like havening that, we're talking about calming the mind and the tapping on the meridian points. It's a depotentiation of the amygdala. And so that's how things can get calmed down in the nervous system. And that's why these kinds of modalities are very helpful for people that are dealing with stressful life events or traumatic life events. So I think that team approach is the best model. Now, this is what I've seen a number of times, is that someone is seeing it would happen in California. Somebody was seeing a psychologist and it was a minor, and their mom or whatever, their parent wanted to take them to an energy healing practitioner of some kind. I'm not going to don't say what the modality was. But the psychologist didn't know that. And so when the psychologist found out that this other unlicensed practitioner was treating the emotional issues of this child, he reported them to the California Board of Psychology, and that practitioner was shut down. for practicing psychology without a license. So there's different ways this all can unravel. So I think if you're all on board, especially, I mean, I think that's such a great combination. If you're working with even a medical doctor, let's say you're going through cancer and you know the stress of cancer and what it does to your body. And so if you could work with an EFT tapping practitioner or to go out and do a guided forced immersion walk, these kinds of activities that really calm the body down and really help balance, because the body seeks homeostasis, it wants to heal. And so I've done a lot of therapeutic touch with my friends who've gone through cancer. Right after they're treated with chemo, brain fog goes away, they're less nauseous, they feel better within hours instead of days. So I think that's a team approach, and that's something I think is would hopefully at some point become the norm as people are learning more about these modalities.
You know, I would just say, I agree with that. Whatever that entire message that you put out, I agree with that, because regular MDs, some practicing PhDs, simply do not have the time that an energy practitioner is going to have to take to get the results that you just described. They're going to have to take hours potentially to get that, and you're going to get a 5-minute, maybe 15 if you're lucky, at the doctor's office, and they've got 3 choices. They give you a pill, they give you a shot, or they cut you open. I mean, that's pretty much the toolbox, right? There's not a lot of other things. And we do some testing, and so that's probably it. And so they honestly have, for the general practitioner out there, very limited exposure to what the 3 of us are currently talking about. And there's, I don't know, go ahead and do it if you want to do it. You know, it'll be something like that. At least where I'm at, that's what's going on. You know, they'll never say, no, don't do it, or I think it's horrible, or, you know, that kind of thing, because it really starts to get up into the spiritual realm, and you can't really tell people how to practice their spirituality as well. If you want to get into a deep prayer state, or call it hypnosis, or call it a meditation, or whatever, it's all calming the mind at whatever way you get there. I guess people get hung up on a lot of the methodologies, but they're ultimately getting to the calming the mind and letting the healing take place from within. And so anyway, that's the point I'm getting at, is I hope they could get to that point where it's all teamwork, but I think we're a long way from that. Doesn't mean we shouldn't put the model out there that that's the way it should be done, because everybody gets a little bite at the apple that way, and nobody's blocking somebody else out of practicing something they have a passion for. And as long as the person who's passionate crosses the T's and dots the I's, does it the right way, then I think they can express that passion in a functional way.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Tony?
And licensing laws would allow that.
Yeah.
It would protect the practitioner, allow them to practice. So that's one of the sort of the pluses of that structure. And I think too, what I hear you say is, what I'm remembering is when acupuncture started to come on the scene, there were now medical doctors who are taking very limited training, hardly any training in acupuncture, and then they could start using acupuncture in their practices. And I think, you know, the true acupuncturists that are really truly trained, they objected to that, and I understand why. I mean, it's like, you should be trained as well, just as I am, in terms of this particular modality, because they're night and day. So I hear what you're saying about, you know, something getting usurped by the current medical profession. I don't see that happening. You know, obviously we're all looking towards integrative health. That's kind of the big buzzword these days. There are a number of universities, Harvard, San Francisco, forget the other ones, have integrative schools, medical schools for integrative practice. But right now what they're talking about is they're integrating acupuncture, massage, chiropractic medicine, and we're kind of still way out on the fringe. So, you know, there's this groundswell and movement, and so we'll see what happens. But yeah, there's lots going on out there right now.
You know, I was thinking about hypnosis, and one state, I'm not going to mention which one, they had a situation where you couldn't practice hypnosis unless you were under the tutelage of a MD or PhD for like 400 hours. And I'm thinking to myself, that was a crazy law. I mean, it's been repealed, my understanding, because where are you going to get $400 under an MD and an MD who doesn't even know what hypnosis is? I mean, so some of these are laws, and I'm in the legislative world too, so I understand, are just put in to block a whole potential group of people. And then it limits the client base to find somebody who can help them because they've been blocked by somebody who's in the know, got the money, hooked into the politicians, and they're going to control it. And it's going to go to them and their buddies. And that's problematic, but that's a political situation that we all have to live with because we live in a political world, and it gets into medicine, it gets into the spirituality and everything, and it's getting deeper into it. And if it's people get into it with the wrong reasons, then we have these problems, and it really will block a lot of people out who might be just absolutely excellent people in there. And then ultimately the customer or client base doesn't have anything. Because I guarantee you the doctors, the MDs aren't got time for that. They just don't have time for it. But they're okay with blocking everybody else out of it, in some places. Not always. I mean, some are great, I know some that are. But we just have to, I think, be really cautious from a political point of view before we jump in. And this is the way you do it. This is the only way you can do it. And there's no exceptions. And then you're not thinking about a whole bunch of other people that maybe that's not the way you haven't even thought of. So trying to bring that group together, because the exclusionary aspects of some of the organizations, I don't care for a lot, because they'll say, only if you have this, this, and this, can you do this, when this, whatever it is they're saying, has been done by virtually lay people for years, and if not centuries. And that is where we run into some landmines in the political realm.
Okay.
Yep. Tommy?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting discussion because there's so many rabbit holes we could jump down without question as we do this kind of stuff. I think maybe, Midge, if you don't mind sharing with people, we talked a little bit about mediumship and that type of stuff. What are some of the things the audience members should listen for that go, this is out of bounds? Because I know people that have had issues, to Terry's point, that every decision has to be run by the psychic. And then they start giving advice that's way out of bounds for what they should be doing. And, what should people listen for to go, this isn't quite right?
Well, kind of what I said before, I don't do mediumship. I don't work in that arena. That's not my area of expertise. But, what you want to do is get information, and you hope the information is a clear channel of something higher than the person who's actually getting the information, the reader or whatever you want to call them, that just offers information and is not telling someone what to do. I think that's, or being judgmental about something. I think ultimately it's always about the client making their choices based on the information that's shared. And again, I think that needs discernment and to know what's appropriate, but I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything in particular. It's kind of it's a case by case basis, but by and large, you don't want to create dependency. You don't want to tell people, what it is they need to do or have to do. And again, the psychic stuff is not my area of expertise. So.
Yeah, we see that with all these type of things, that some people just go outside the scope of what they should be going to. Doesn't matter which it is, to your point.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's maybe more ego-based than anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, Tommy and I come from a training background, so we train a lot of people in a lot of things. And so we have seen people attempt to train people, and not even in this field, different field, attempt to train people, and they themselves are not anywhere close to what they need to be, but they hold themselves out at national levels that they're qualified to do this sort of thing, and they're not. And that goes to the agency even that may be purporting the ability to certify somebody in something, and that it's a shadow. It's not really true. So that's problematic. But we're going to wrap this thing up a little bit because we're running out of time. But I wanted to, Midge, if you would, and first off, I want to say thank you for coming on. This has been enlightening. I can't thank you enough. It's, I love deep discussions, and it makes you think. But tell us again slowly the name of your book, where they can get it, and that there's a certification program goes with it.
Thanks, Terry. It's been fun to be with you guys today. My book is called Practice Energy Healing in Integrity: The Joy of Offering Your Gifts Legally and Ethically. So it's really a resource book that you should have, every energy healing practitioner should have to refer to when they need to. It covers ethical issues, how to choose a client properly, websites and marketing, and the legal issues you need to be aware of. It's a very practical approach, and it's not a big book. And so that can be found on Amazon. The print book can be found on Amazon, and also the Kindle version. I have a PDF version of the book that can be bought on my website. And the exam based on the book is only available on my website, which is midgemurphy.com. And I highly encourage those energy healing practitioners that are wanting to be properly trained in ethics and legal issues to take the exam. It's a great investment. It's $150, and you earn a certificate of completion. And that is a professional credential that makes you look more professional, especially if you're building your business or you want to add more clients. And that's a critical piece that you could add to your practice that's going to enhance your level of professionalism. And the other piece that I want to share is I also have a revenue sharing program with training organizations. And it's very simple. If you're training and certifying practitioners, then they need to be trained in ethics and legal issues in order to be viable and legitimate. And so I offer a revenue sharing program that if your training organization is training practitioners, that part of the core curriculum for becoming certified is for them to read the book and take the exam. And you just have to put the link to my website where they can purchase the exam on the training organization's website. I grade the exam, I send out the certificate of completion, let the organization know, hey, Sally just completed her ethics training, yay. So it's very simple. And then you get a 10% commission off of every exam that is sold or bought by your one of your students. And I pay my commissions on a quarterly basis. So it's a win-win. It also reduces the training organization's potential liability, because what you have to understand is if you're out there training practitioners, you can be held legally liable for the actions of those you train. It's called the doctrine of vicarious liability, well established in the law. So it behooves the training organization to make sure that they have allowed and offered this training to their students, because it not only benefits the students as they go out and practice, but also protects the organization from legal liability. So,
fantastic. Tommy, got any final thoughts?
Yeah, I want to thank you for coming on. This has been something of mine that I've wanted to talk about for a long time. I've seen many people do it right, and I've seen a number of people do it wrong. And it was time to have that discussion. I can attest to the book. I bought that many years ago and read it. So it's definitely worth a read. If you haven't done it yet, do it.
Yeah, and I updated it in 2020. I added a bunch of content. So during the pandemic, I was very busy. It was a time for me that I had all this space and time. I thought I need to add some content to the book. So I came out with an expanded edition in 2020.
Awesome.
Thank you, Tommy.
Well, very good. Well, thank you all for being here. And for those of us here on the Metaphysical Mysteries, thanks for listening. And I hope you enjoyed this with Midge Murphy. And man, she's got it going on when it comes to ethics. So check out her stuff. It'll be linked into our website. So by all means, take a look, and hopefully that'll help. So from all of us here at the Metaphysical Mysteries, thanks for listening. And we will be back with another exciting guest in the very near future. Thanks.